Sure.
Sure. Okay.
Are we ready to go?
Yes.
Tom's ready to go. Well, I would just say that in organizing these programs, probably the lifeblood of our demo situation is our own members. And we're fortunate to have a lot of experienced and talented people who can help out with this. But one thing that's been different this year is the ability to attract some national level people. And when we have someone who's of a national status within our club who helps out with these demos, then that's just an extra plus. So I know I was flipping through the pages of the AAW magazine that came the other day and saw I was looking at the list of names on the ad from oh gosh, let me get it here. The John C. Campbell Folk School, and I saw two of our demonstrators on there. Rudy Lopez was one, and the other was Tom Boley. So we're exceptionally fortunate to have someone of Tom's stature, both as a turner and as a teacher, within our club, and is willing to help out and do things to keep our club going that Tom does. I really appreciate it. And then just to get away from Tom for a minute, there's nothing, absolutely nothing like turning on your lathe and putting a sharp tool to a piece of wood. And the feeling that comes with that is really special. And so therefore the importance of this demo on sharpening. So Tom, let's have you take it over now.
All right, thanks, Steve. That was a glowing introduction. I'm not sure all that was truthful, but I appreciate it.
All truthful and well-deserved.
Yeah, thanks. One other thing, Steve, you failed to explain was that this is part of your series of Back to Basics. And, we recognize that, we do have some newer folks and people that maybe don't turn all the time or are relatively new to it. And there are basic concepts, basic ideas that we need to address. We need to talk about, we need to demonstrate, we need to teach. And this is part of your idea, your series of Back to Basics. I think there's, we did some spindle turning, we're doing sharpening today, we got a bowl turning class coming up in the near future. And Steve is our leading the programs right now. I think it's a great idea. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to talk to you all, my fellow wood turners, and hopefully this will be of interest to you. And I hope that it will be something that will help you learn and be able to be a better turner. As always, you're welcome to contact me directly. Talk to your fellow wood turners. If you have questions, you will find answers. You will find people willing to talk to you and to explain, techniques, methods, equipment, materials, supplies, all those things that go into our craft. So this one today is Back to Basics, sharpening. The first thing to know is you need these things to be a wood turner. You have to have a lathe or access to one. You have to have wood turning tools. You have to have wood, but you have to have a way to sharpen your tools. So in sharpening, there are a number of different products on the market. Grinders, different styles of grinders. There's a Tormek grinder. There are other grinders. The ones that almost all wood turners use are the basic two-wheel grinder. And we'll in fact, we can switch to that. So here is my basic grinder. And this is the one I use all the time. I have another one, which I'll show you in just a moment, and I'll explain that. but need to have a grinder. When you get a grinder, and where would you get one? The best source is Woodcraft in Lenexa. Okay, so continuing, the best source for a standard two-wheel grinder is probably Woodcraft in Lenexa. They sell a right grinder. The white aluminum oxide wheels on it. I think the price is $160, but they often have it on sale for $110, $50 off. That's the time to buy it. So check with Woodcraft about when they might have a sale and get that. The jig that every wood turner I know of uses is called the Wolverine jig. It's made by One Way up in Canada. It's a terrific jig. We'll talk about that. And there's one more piece with that. It's called a Very Grind jig. Excuse me. And that's also made by One Way. So we got the grinder on the screen right now. So let's talk about this for a moment. When you get a grinder, show that picture just a moment, right? So this is the grinder that you get. It comes with a couple of aluminum oxide wheels, and the wheels are very good. They're good wheels. They're about 1 inch wide, and they work just fine. So you've heard of cubic boron nitride, CBN. We'll talk about that in a minute. Those are very expensive wheels, and you don't need those. They're nice to have. They're real nice to have for, and one of the main reasons is that they're a 1/2 inch wider than the aluminum oxide wheels. So, that's very helpful, but you don't need that. So don't feel as though you see somebody with CBN wheels, the steel wheels, that you need to buy those. You don't need to. If you want to, it's fine. They're nice wheels, but they're not a requirement by any means. But once you have, let's come back to this one. Once you have your grinder, and you can see this one has the CBN wheels on it. Once you have your grinder, then you need to set it up. The Wolverine jig comes with 4 parts. There's a receiver that goes under each of the wheels. There's a pocket bar that slides in, and then there's a platform that slides in, and those are the 4 parts of the Wolverine jig. To set this up, you have to mount. You want to mount this on a board so you can move it around intact, but you also have to have it on a board because these 2 receivers have to be screwed into the board to stay in place. The grinder itself has to be mounted on about a 3/4 inch piece of wood just to get it up a little higher, so there's plenty of room to clear the receivers that are under the wheel. And then you have a platform and the pocket bar. I have the same thing over here on this other grinder, and it's set up the same way. You wonder why I have 2 grinders. Let me explain. The tools that we use come in 2 kinds, 2 types of steel generally, in general terms, 2 types of steel. One is high-speed steel. That's the newer version. That's what are sold now. I don't even know if you can get carbon steel tools anymore, but the tools that we all use are high-speed steel, but you will find people that have carbon steel tools. They're just fine. They work great. But if you have CBN wheels on your grinder at home and you have somebody come over to show them how to be a wood turner, if they bring their own tools, then you want to check to be sure they're what kind of steel they are. If you have the ceramic or the aluminum oxide wheels, then it doesn't matter what kind of steel. That works on both a high-speed steel and carbon steel. But if you're using the cubic boron nitride CBN wheels, then the carbon steel can damage them. So it's better not to do that. That's why I bought this other grinder. So having people come here to learn wood turning and so forth, I found that sometimes people do bring carbon steel tools here, and I want to be sure I'm not going to damage these wheels by sharpening their tools on these. So I have the other. How do you tell the difference? Let's do that. Ray, let's move over here. So let's see, there's a spark pattern that is on these that is different, and depending on the steel. This is a high-speed steel tool, so just look at the spark pattern that comes off of this. I don't know if you can even see it. And now look at the spark pattern that comes off a carbon tool. I realize that's noisy. Stand by a minute. I'll turn this off a sec. Okay, I have a drawing which may help show you what I want you to see. Using high-speed steel, this is the wheel itself, the spark pattern is straight. Those sparks come right off and they're just straight, and they spread out a little bit, but they're straight. The carbon steel spark come off, they come down a ways, and it's like they explode again into a fork. So I'll show you once again as we so you can see the difference. And these are more like a sparkler, like a 4th of July sparkler. Boy, they jump out there, and it's a real pretty pattern. But that will help you determine what is high-speed steel, what's carbon. So let's go back to carbon for a moment, just to show you what that looks like. Okay, can you see the difference? Can you see what I'm trying to show you there? It's really important to recognize that if you're using the aluminum oxide wheels, doesn't matter. It'll work for everything. But if you have CBN wheels, then watch for that. If you put somebody's tool on your CBN wheel and you get that sparkler effect that flashes, off the end of it, then you better loan them one of your high-speed steel tools. While we're on this grinder, I want to show you one more aspect of this. And this is pretty important. The question is, let's see. I need a little block of wood. Here's one. Okay, so you want to stop the wheels. How do you do that? Take a block of wood and press it to the side of the wheel, and it'll slow down and stop. Don't grab it with your fingers, because it's rough. It'll catch your fingers, and it'll hurt. So just use a block of wood on the side to stop the wheel. What I want to show you here is how to dress the wheels. If you look at this, you can see you can see that the this wheel is pretty dirty. Even the other one is too, but this one is a good example. That's been used quite a bit, hasn't been dressed. So, let me show you how to do that. Now this is the dresser. This is the tool that we use. It's a little T thing. On the end of this is a diamond embedded layer, and that's what we use to clean off the wheels. These wheels, these aluminum oxide wheels, are what we call friable. That doesn't mean you can put them in a skillet with a little bit of bacon and cook them up and eat them, but friable means they're soft enough that they will break off. The material that holds the aluminum oxide particles together will disintegrate and break off, and you'll end up, if you're not careful, you can end up with grooves in your wheel. So, and of course it does fill up with steel. Yeah, look, here's a spot, there's a little chip out right there, you see? And you can see how this is loaded up a little bit, but I'm all set up on this side, I'll just show you. So to dress this wheel, set your platform so that you can put your dresser right here on the platform and go back and forth. I'll do it even though it's noisy. So as you run the dresser back and forth on here, and here's my stopping block, we'll get that slowed down. You can see I've cleaned this off quite a bit. I saw something though that might be instructive. See, there's a dark area. There's a dark area there, and I think what's happened is that over time that has become slightly, very slightly out of round. So I would work with that for a little while and get that back into round by slowly and carefully and very lightly going back and forth with my dresser here and clean that up and re-round that wheel and clean off the steel that's embedded. So that's a technique that you do not use on your CBN wheels. The CBN wheels are nice. Not only are they wider, but here's how I stop them. Okay, so I want to turn it off and adjust something. And with a little bit of pressure, it pretty quickly stops it. Don't grab up here, don't put your finger here, but on the side, which is very smooth on this wheel, you got to know your wheels, but this is very smooth. You can put your hand right here and slow it down and stop it. Excuse me. Let's see, setup, we talked about that. Okay, I'm going to talk about how I sharpen the tools that I use. But there's one tool that I want to talk about, one method that's kind of interesting. Stuart Batty is a well-known professional wood turner and demonstrator, does a great job. His theory is using what we call a 40-40 grind. 40 degrees is his theory that wood turning tools should be for an angle. The reason he says that is because he says the tooth of the beaver is 40 degrees and they ought to know. Okay, so he advocates the 40 degree, and I have taken one of my tools and made it a 40 degree grind, and that is really, let's see, where can I best do this? Right here, right there. There's a good. You can see that angle. That's about a 40 degree angle, and you can also see that the bevel comes back quite a ways on the tool, which just happens to be the case for the 40 degree grind. But how do you get a 40 degree grind on your tool if you want to do that? There are two ways. Well, maybe there are more than two ways. I'll teach you two ways. The first way is by using a special jig for a 40-degree grind. Johannes Michelson, famous for creating the turned wood hat, has developed a system to be able to make the 40-degree grind. For a long time, there was no jig for it. You just had to do it in the old-fashioned way, which I'll show you in a moment. But now there is a way. So that comes with this device right here and this. So this is the holder. We'll put that in. There's a little stop that goes right there. I'm going to run this in with the flute down, okay? Hold it in the center. Turn this knob to tighten it up. And then I come back over here, and now I can set the, let's see, use the Raptor here to set this at 40 degrees in the right distance. This is a 40-degree Raptor tool to set it. And then once that's set, then I will use this hole here and this hole to sharpen the end of the tool. That on one side, this on the other side, and that sharpens my 40 degrees. It works well. I do use it when I sharpen this 40-degree tool. You may be wondering, why would I want one tool that's a different angle than all the rest of them? And the answer is that I've found it's very useful for some applications, particularly if I need to cut off the end of a spindle piece where the grain is parallel to the blade. Then I can use this 40-degree grind across the end. Certainly as good as with a spindle gouge, but it's a great cut. The other way to do that is to make yourself a little go-by, and this, let's see, where I'll put it right here. No, let me do it this way. So the angle here on this piece of wood is 40 degrees right there, and I've got it marked. You can't see it because it's in pencil, so it's very light, but it's 40 degrees. So I will set this platform at 40 degrees using this jig, this little go-by. It's 40 degrees. Tighten that up. By the way, when you tighten up your little platform, you want to be sure it doesn't hit the wheel, just like wood turning. If you stop the lathe, you adjust your tool rest, and then before you start the lathe, you spin the piece of wood on the lathe to be sure it doesn't hit your tool rest. So likewise on the grinder, you set it up, then you spin it before you start it. The other thing to do is use a Sharpie or some kind of marker, and on your platform, set the top edge of this, and then you can mark your 40-degree mark, your 40-degree angle right on the platform, okay? So then when you sharpen that tool, you're set up, and you can come in here with 40 degrees on this side, roll it over as you swing across the platform to 40 degrees on this side, and you will sharpen the end. You only generally use the end of the tool anyway, just you don't use shear cut, which this works fine for. On the Michelson jig, I found that it ends up doing the whole side of the bevel. This method, it doesn't go back that far, but that's fine. You still have your 40 degrees, and it works well. So that That's the 40-degree bowl gouge. I have one bowl gouge that I have 40 degrees on, and I use that from time to time for specialty work. I have a friend back in Virginia who has adopted the 40 degrees. He loves it. All his bowl gouges are 40 degrees, and he thinks it works just fine. I think that's a little too sharp. It's a little too pointed for my bowl work. I don't like to use it. I prefer a little, instead of quite a 40-degree angle, maybe not quite that much. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But that's the 40-degree business. Okay, let's talk about sharpening each of the tools. And so we have a pocket bar. And when you go to a club demo, when we have a public demo, we'll take the club grinder, or somebody will bring a grinder, and it'll have this Wolverine jig on it. It's good because if you have one at home, because now you know how to use it, you know how to sharpen your tools, rather than trying to learn a new system. The very grind jig is like this, okay? And I've got these angles set, this pin set, so that it's the same. I've got two of them. It's the same angle. I'll talk to you about in a minute why I have two of them. But I've got two of them, and this is the one. I use this very grind jig for bowl gouges and spindle gouges. And I remember now, I didn't tell you the price of these things. The Wolverine jig right now at Woodcraft is about $90. And this is about $55. That's a lot of money. The grinder, the jigs and so forth, a lot of money. But as a member of Flint Hills Woodturners, remember, we get a 10% discount on stuff like this at Woodcraft. Now, if the grinder is on sale for $50 off, almost a third, they're not going to give you another 10%. But for the Wolverine jig, the very grind jig for tools and so forth, they are so kind to offer us a 10% discount on tools, not on power tools. Their margin isn't big enough on power tools to do that, but on the Wolverine jig, the very grind jig, on tools, on wood and so forth, show them your membership card, they'll give you a 10% discount. It's wonderful. I thank them profusely every time I'm in there for doing that. Okay, so I have the very grind jig. The question is, how do we use this to sharpen a bowl gouge? Let me show you. And I'll use the big one. This is a 1/2 inch bowl gouge. And I'll back this off here. Ray, can you get down here? Oh, you are. That's good. Okay, right down here, I have a little block of wood, and the face of it is a piece of just a little plastic veneer. It's a, Formica, a little piece of that I cut to go across the face of it to make a harder surface. Because when this is 2 inches from the edge of the table to this block, and I want to bring my tool in here in the very grind jig up to 2 inches and then tighten it up. Why 2 inches? When I started wood turning, I was a member of the Capital Area Woodturners in Alexandria, Virginia. And at that time, everybody said, oh, 1 3/4 inches. But over time, they started doing some experimenting and playing around and thought that 2 inches was better. So we all converted to 2 inches, and that's what I've stuck with since then. But the point of the Formica on the face of this little block is that it's hard and it keeps you from wearing a groove in the face of that block. If you don't have something on that block of wood, then over time, every time you push the tool against it, as gentle as you may be, you're going to find you're going to cut a little groove in that wood, and now it's no longer 2 inches, now it's 2 1/16, 2 1/8, and so forth, and it just gets worse. But a little block of hard material of some kind, gee, you know, you can use an old credit card, take an old credit card, cut it, glue it to a block of wood, and put it on there. I would use the part that doesn't have your number on it, but you put a credit card, anything like that, that's a harder surface you can use. You can even probably use a piece of a small scrap of purple hardwood, because that's a very hard wood. You just need to watch it, so if it develops a groove, take it off, put another piece on there. So I have this, so I'm at 2 inches, I'm tight. The next step is to bring the pocket bar out with this piece that sticks out down inside the pocket bar, and then match the angle on the end of the tool to the wheel. So, you know, once you're matched, tighten it up so it'll hold its position, and then as you grind, you can, you know, rotate the tool in that pocket bar. Here's a problem that new wood turners have, is this pin is down in the pocket bar, but they're not paying attention as they're grinding. They're watching up here, but they've gotten this angle, this piece down here, away from the corner of the pocket. Be sure it's clear back tight in the pocket, at the corner of the pocket, to maintain the proper angle. Now, when I sharpen one of these, I do it like this. First of all, I want to stand back so I can swing the handle all the way past me, so I can do both sides of the tool. But I will generally start with one side, grind one side, swing it around, grind the other side, and then link the two sides up across the end. Okay, back and forth, and I'm done. That way I have a nice smooth bevel all the way around the tool, and no spare parts sticking out. Okay. But here's an important aspect of this, and I think this applies particularly to bowl gouges. When you're using a bowl gouge, when you're sharpening a bowl gouge, what you want to do is have this surface, this angle, from the tip to this corner up here, either straight, too high, they're either straight or just slightly curved. If you spend too much time, go back here, if you spend too much time sharpening across the tip of this tool, then you're going to end up wearing that tip back. And because when you're against that grinder, you just have a little tiny band of steel, and it's going to grind off pretty rapidly because there's not much surface area to slow down the actual grinding process. When you're on the side over here like this or like this, then there's a lot of surface area against the wheel, and it's not going to grind steel away quite as fast. But if you're starting out, you're going slowly here, and you're going around to the other side and then back to this side, you're spending a lot of time right there on the tip, and you're grinding that away. And what you will end up doing, instead of this profile where it's just slightly curved or straight, you'll end up with this kind of profile, and you'll have the tip ground back. And what that does is result in the profile between the tip and this corner being more like this, kind of pumped up. And then if you decide to go to do a shear cut or shear scrape, it can be really aggressive. So that's why I recommend being real careful and keeping this straight or just slightly curved. Here, I want to show you the other side of this. Let's see if I can, oh, I don't know if I can hear it, maybe like this. It's not showing up real well, but you need to kind of keep an eye out on the size. And as not every time, when you grind it, go back and work. But time to time, look at it. Hold it up like this. Hold it up and sight over the top and see if it looks straight or not. If you find that there's a low spot or a high spot, then go back and grind it down smooth again so it's uniform on both sides, so it'll give you a uniform cut. You can rely on the shape of the tool to do what you want it to do. I have, let's see which one. I have some bowl gouges from 3/4 inch, which I never use. I won it in a raffle one time. I ought to put it in a raffle here. I never use it. It's cool to have. I never use it. Down to about a 1/4 inch bowl gouge, which is pretty darn small. But I found I use that from time to time. It's a very helpful bowl gouge. So I've got several different sizes of bowl gouge. I use them all the same way. I grind them all the same way, and it just depends on what the application is. But the method of shaping it and sharpening it is the same. Let's talk about a spindle gouge. A spindle gouge is, as you know, is different from a bowl gouge. This is the bowl gouge on the top. It's got a nice deep spindle or deep flute in it. This is a spindle gouge, which has not nearly as deep a flute. The shaft of these is the same. These are both about 2 inches across. But look at the difference in the angle on the end. The bowl gouge is about a 55-degree angle on the end. The spindle gouge is about a 35-degree angle. And I put those angles on because someone told me those were good angles, and I have found over years of wood turning that's true. So 55 to 60 degrees on the bowl gouge, about 35 degrees on the spindle gouge. How do you know? So here it is. Here is a really helpful tool. This is a little device I can use to read the angle of my tool. So let's just check this one and see what it is. So I'm going to put this in here. I'm going to put this long bar right in the flute, and then set this up so the angle is just the same as a spindle gouge. And then I can read it up here, and I see that it reads 40 degrees. Frankly, I prefer about 35 degrees, but 35 to use for your spindle gouge. So I would prefer that being a little sharper. Let me pull out a spindle gouge and see what that one is. So here, that's not going to work. Let me find a spindle gouge with a longer flute. I don't think they're too far away. That's a gouge. That's a scraper. Let me try this one, the one I had out, but I'll put it in the other direction. So I'll put this in the flute and check the angle right there. Take it away, and that shows 50 degrees. So that's way off. I really prefer that to be 35. And what has happened here is I've let it go. I've come over, I sharpen it, I go back and work, and I have failed to check the angle on it. And so I don't know, I'm not keeping track of what the is. Let me try this one. Same thing. This is a smaller spindle gouge. Okay, so that's about 45 degrees, which I also think is not quite sharp enough for a spindle gouge. No wonder those aren't working as well as I thought they should. Those are my daily tools. I use them all the time, and I obviously will need to adjust those. But let's talk about how to sharpen the spindle gouge. So the spindle gouge is basically the same as the bowl gouge for sharpening. Here's where I use the upper very grind jig. The reason I have two of them is because I use one for fat tools, one for skinny tools, and so I don't have to keep moving them back and forth all the time to adjust them. I go with 2 inches here, and this particular tool is going to demonstrate a really important aspect of it. I'll show you that in just a moment. So I'm 2 inches out here. I'll use the pocket bar, adjust that up here, so I'm matching the angle. Now, how do I know? For women who have ponytails and long hair that's always in the way, I'm beginning to be very sympathetic. Okay, so what I have is a spindle gouge. I got the pocket bar angled just right, I think. But the way to find out is to take a Sharpie marker and mark. Let's see where we show it. We'll mark the end here. You don't have to do the whole thing, just a little bit of it. And so I now have marked the end of the bevel with a black Sharpie marker. So if I put this back on the grinder, turn the grinder on, I can see where I am. And you can see I'm not quite there. I've done the heel of this bevel and not the whole thing. So I want to pull the pocket bar out just a little bit, put it back on, see where that hits, and that does hit the whole thing. So now I can turn this on, sharpen one side, sharpen the other side, and then link them up across the end. I don't know if you can see this or not. Let's see. Let's see. Yeah. Okay, right there, there's a little tiny fleck of black. So that is not quite sharp. I did not get that. So I'll go back here and go across again and finish that sharpening. So now I have it. And that gives me a good sharp edge on that one. Here's something that I want to be sure to show you. Let's see if we can do it. We can find there, that angle right there. As you see, this piece that screws down to hold the tool in place, at the end of this bolt, there's air. Can you see daylight through that? It should be Huh. My, that's glued on there and it has come loose. Hold on a sec. I got to get something to release that. Yeah. Let me explain what happened when this was the first very grind jig I ever had. When I traveled to Japan one time, I was going to be there for several weeks, and so I wanted to use the hobby shop on base. So I took some tools and so forth with me, and I took my very grind jig, but in the suitcase, the plastic knob at that time got crushed. So I made a new wood knob, and now I epoxied it in there, and it has come loose, so it would not loosen up the jig. So let me, I want to show you this because it's important. Let me go to this one. So it had gotten to the point where 2 inches out at the end, and my there. So you'd see that piece down here at the bottom is resting on the slope that goes up at the end of the flute. So what I found is you tighten that up, and as you're sharpening it, the vibration in the tool as you sharpen can cause that to slip and slide down here, and suddenly, instead of being 2 inches out, now you're 1.5 inches. And so the way to fix that, as your tool the flute gets shorter and shorter and shorter, you can go to your grinder and grind off this part right here and grind a flat spot there. Grind a flat spot on the top of the tool so that as your very grind jig presses against it to hold it tight, it moves back farther and farther. It will be on a flat spot and not on this curve. It should hold the tool just fine. At some point, when you run out of flute, throw the tool away and go buy a new one. But you can extend the sharpening ability of this tool by just flattening out that particular spot on the shaft of the tool. Okay, one of the tools that we all love to use is the Skew. It's a great tool. It's an absolutely magnificent tool. A lot of people are kind of afraid of the Skew because they don't think that they control it. It tends to get away. It skates across the wood and does some really strange things. But my advice is get somebody that knows how to use it, teach you how to use it, and then practice, practice, practice. What you'll find is that as you practice, your skills will improve to the point where you can use a Skew and it'll be a marvelous tool. It has two functions. One would be to cut and slice spindle work. Okay, we're not talking about how to use the tools today. We're talking about how to sharpen them, but that is one of its uses. The other use sometimes is as a scraper. Basically, it's a drop nose scraper, and it works very well. So let's talk about how to sharpen a skew. I'll use this large one because you can see it better. Okay, so there's a pocket bar, the attachment that you can get that clamps into this pocket bar, and it extends out about this far on both sides. And there's another pocket over here and a pocket over here at the end. So it's for sharpening skews. So you pull the pocket bar out with this attachment on it, and you can bring it out so that you can set up your skew to sharpen one side. You go over here and you sharpen the other side. It works well. I have long sharpened, or did for a long time, sharpened my skew like this, right in the center pocket bar, very carefully, and found that that worked just fine also. But now, when I don't do it that way, I found that using the platform works a lot better. So once again, just like the other tools, you set up your platform at the right angle so that you're matching your angle on your on your skew, and the platform is flat, the side of the tool is flat, and it's very easy to just rotate this on the wheel in one direction and then in the other direction on the other side to sharpen that skew. Let's see, I think I can quickly find, first tool. Now you'll see that I have sharpened that in a curve. So there's a curved end on that, and that was advanced by Alan Lacer, who visited us a couple of years ago and did a great demo as well as a really useful couple of workshops for us. He likes this curve. The other option is a straight skew, and when you buy a skew, that's what you're going to get. You're going to get a straight edge. So when you sharpen that, same thing, you sharpen it, but instead of spinning the tool, you just go back and forth. You want the edge of the skew right there to be horizontal and not angled. If you angle it, you're going to start curving the end of the tool. So keep it straight, go back and forth on the tool, flip it over the other side, same thing, back and forth, and you will end up with a nice sharp skew. I sharpen my skews on the coarser wheel. I think this is an 80 grit wheel, and that's where I sharpen my skew, all the skews, and my scrapers. Mainly so I don't have to keep switching back and forth between the fine wheel and the coarse wheel. I find that is just fine. That works just fine for me. But the other thing that you will quickly learn, you will hear people talk about it, is that some people will like to hone a skew. And the way to do that is with a diamond hone. This is a piece of steel, teardrop steel. In fact, I'm pretty sure I got this from Alan Lacer also years and years ago. But Alan advocates honing the skew. And let me show you how to do that. We'll grab a skew here. So here's my skew, and I want to hone this, put the stone or the steel on the back, the trailing edge of the bevel, and then the skew on the leading edge, the sharp edge, and just work back and forth like this. Just by hand, I'm staying on that back bevel, and the back edge of the bevel, and just rubbing back and forth to the leading edge, and then turn it over, do the same thing again. If you try to do it by hand without having your steel on that trailing edge of the bevel, then your angle up here at the sharp edge is going to be all over the place and not uniform. So on the back edge, forward to the front edge, and then try to stay on both the leading edge as well as that trailing edge while you hone. Okay, I think you'll find that that will work the best for you. I have tried honing some of the other tools, and I think it's unnecessary. I think it's for me, I think it's wasted effort. It's just not worth the time to try to do that. So I don't. But I have learned, on Alan Lacer's urging, I've learned to hone my skew from time to time. Instead of going back to the grinder and grinding off more steel, I just pull out my diamond hone and give it a little touch up, and it seems to work just fine for me. One other thing about skews: what angle should this be? What angle should this tool be at the end? And frankly, I'm not sure. I've never actually measured it. But once again, going back to Alan Lacer, he says that the width of the bevel should be 1.5 times the thickness of the tool. So this is 3/8 of an inch thick. So this bevel should be, what, 9/16 or thereabouts? And that is really not quite enough. That is, right now, it's about 1/2 inch. So I'm shy about 1/16 of an inch on the width of this bevel. Works just fine. Now, and I've told you already that that I recommend particular angles. Those are guidelines. Those aren't absolutes. You will find other people that will have a particular angle they want to use with their tools, and they will swear by those and tell you that's the only angle you should use. I'm telling you what works for me, and if you find somebody else that has a suggestion for you, give it a try. Maybe it'll work better for you. But for your skews, try to have the bevel about 1.5 times the width of the bevel, 1.5 times the thickness of the steel of the tool. Let's see. Another tool that we all use is a parting tool. Probably the easiest tool to sharpen, but it's probably the easiest tool to mess up too. So we'll pull a parting tool out of here. We'll pull there it is. Good. So a parting tool, this is my 1/8 inch parting tool. And my setup for that is, once again, back to the pocket bar. So I have the pocket bar here, loosen that. I'm going to move it in so that my angle matches the wheel. So you can see that's pretty close probably. In the camera angle, it looks like it could go just a little closer. Overshot it there. And you can go back to the, in fact, we'll do that. You can go back to the Sharping once again as you're learning to do that to see where you should be. So now I've blackened that side of the bevel of the point of the tool. So I think I've got the angle right. We'll check it. And now I'm going to turn it on and give that a sharpen. Okay. Now this is very instructive. Let me stop this because it's noisy. Once again, don't try to stop it this way if you're using aluminum oxide wheel. So you can see on this where we want to be, right there, okay? So you can see that little black mark on the face of the bevel. That's where I marked it, and it did not grind off. But the rest of it's all the way to the end. So I know on the wheel, but I wasn't wheel. So I need to go back, recognize where that side is, and try again. And now I have it. Okay. Now I've gotten all the black ink off of that, and I know it's that side sharpened. So I flip it over, do the same thing on the other side. And you know, as you use these tools, they get kind of cruddy. They get dirty. They get materials on them that will be easy to see. You don't have to use a Sharpie each time. If it gets dirty and cruddy, when you go to the grinder, you can touch it briefly, take a look at it, and you should be able to tell if you have the pocket bar in the right place or not. Here's the other thing about a skew, and I'm going to go to, once again, my show and tell pieces over here. When you're using the things that you want, let's see, right here. You want the top edge to be absolutely square and straight across. This is just a wood demo piece. It's not quite there, but it's pretty close. But you want that to be straight across. One of the principal uses of a parting tool is to make a narrow but flat face on your piece, often on a spindle. So if you have a spindle and you have a profile on it and you have a little flat fillet, you want it to be flat. Say you have a fillet, a bead, a fillet, and then a cove and another fillet. I want those to be nice and flat, parallel to the grain. So you have to grind that accordingly. I have known people, maybe some of you have done this, who will take a parting tool like this and purposely grind this at an angle, so because the jaws of their chucks are dovetail jaws. So when they put a tenon on the bottom of a bowl, they want the tenon to be a dovetail tenon. So they'll just take a parting tool and go straight in if it's at an angle, and they can cut that dovetail tenon very easily with a little angled parting tool. But generally, you do that as a purpose-built tool. The other parting tools you want. That's an important aspect of parting tools. They're great tools, just like all these are. They have particular applications, and we use them accordingly. Yes, let me do that. Thanks. I have one that will be a good one to show too. That's not it. That's not it. It's gone. No, it's not gone. It's probably here somewhere. Okay. We'll press on. Okay, here's one that Ray brought. It's a carbon steel tool. He brought it to be able to demonstrate the spark pattern from carbon steel. But look at this tool. You see that there's a ridge right here in the center on both sides. It's a diamond-shaped parting tool, as opposed to this one of mine, which is flat on both sides. So with this one, the reason it's fatter in the center, it's just a little fatter in the center where that ridge is, so that if you're cutting into a spindle, you want to go straight in. That makes the kerf slightly wider than most of the tool. The very center where it's fat right there is the same width as the kerf. But all that's touching the sides of that kerf is that center edge right there in the middle of the tool, as opposed to this one. This one is flat, and if I were to make a deep parting cut in a piece, then that's going to be rubbing on both sides, and it could be a little catchy. It could be it could burn the tool, burn the wood, all kinds of things. But the way to deal with that, of course, is to go back out and come back in again and just widen the kerf a little bit. But the diamond shaped parting tool, you don't have to worry about that. You can do it, you can widen it if you want, but at least for a reasonably shallow cut, and you sharpen it. Here's something you have to remember. When you sharpen it, I bet we can see that. Yeah. Okay, when you sharpen that, you want the tip, the very point, to be right at the center of the widest part, so that it's cutting at the widest part of the tool, and it's not offset, to maybe up here or something a little bit where the actual tool is narrower than the width of the tool. The cut is narrower than the width of the tool itself. So that's a thank you for pointing it out, Ray. I didn't almost miss that aspect. Okay, we've talked about spindle gouges, bowl gouges. We've talked about skews and parting tools. A couple more pieces, and one is the scraper. Scrapers are awesome. They're just terrific. I like to use a scraper as a delicate tool when I'm really having trouble trying to smooth out a spot, particularly inside a bowl, and I just can't seem to get it. I got ridges and things. I could go in there with 80 grit and spend some time smoothing it out, but I find that sometimes if I'm having trouble with that, I'll take my round nose scraper and go inside that bowl and just lightly smooth out those ridges. But how do you sharpen a scraper? Well, let's take a look at it. So here's a round nose scraper, and the way I do this is with the platform. Once again, as so many other tools, I'm going to come up here and match the angle of the end of the tool with the platform. With the platform, get it matched at the on the wheel so that it's even, and the angle I'm looking for is about 80 degrees. I was surprised when Alan Lacer was here. He seemed to think that a much sharper angle was better on a scraper. So I tried it. I sharpened one at a sharper angle, and frankly, I didn't like it. I thought it was too aggressive, and I didn't really like it. So maybe it's just because I was used to one that was 80 degrees and 70, 60. I thought that was a little too sharp on the end for a scraper. So I backed off, went back to my 80 degrees. You decide what's best for you. Give it a try. But I would recommend 80 degrees on the end here. So on the platform, when you sharpen this one, get it set up, and then you can go around here and around the other side and get that nice and sharp. And it'll work just fine. When you're done, you will probably feel a little burr on the top of it. And that burr is good. That will help in your when you're using it. And some people will run a burr on that and then take a diamond bar and grind that burr off so the tool is nice and smooth and flat. And I'll demonstrate here with a Sharpie pen. Use a hardened steel rod. And they make tools for this. It's called a Furnishing Tool, and you can put your burnishing tool here and pull it around hard on the end of that scraper, and you're basically curling a little burr up on top of the scraper. And then when you come into, where can I demonstrate this? Oh, I'll do it here. Say this surface is my bowl or even my tray. Now I've got that burr on there, so I want to engage that burr with the wood. I'm going to come in like this at an angle and bring, and you see I've got this. This is straight, this is at an angle, and I'm going to come in here and actually pull the burr only across the wood and take off fine shaving. It's really functioning like a cabinet scraper at that point, and it seems to work. I really don't do that. I know some people do, and it's a good technique. You need to understand what it is, but I find it unnecessary, so I don't do it. But you need to know about it. You use a hardened steel rod, a burnishing tool, to drag that and curl that little burr up there. Off the grinder, you will have a burr on the tool, but that grinder burr is very fragile. It's ragged, it's fragile, and when you start using the tool, it's probably going to mostly break off anyway. But when you smooth out the edge, the top surface, pull a burr on it with a burnishing tool, that burr is a much more stable, much harder and firmer burr, and will last much longer. The next tool, and maybe the last tool, is the spindle roughing gouge. Now remember, we call this a spindle roughing gouge, not just a roughing gouge. And the reason we do that is because new turners say, oh, it's a roughing gouge, I can use it to rough out anything. Don't do that. You use this for spindle work. And I saw a guy one time in a public demonstration using something like this on a faceplate work on where the grain was across the bed of the lathe rather than along the bed of the lathe, and he used a spindle roughing gouge, and all of us in the audience were waiting for disaster to befall, but it did not. And he was fortunate. He said he does it all the time. Okay, but that was a very, very specialized application he was doing. He was not cutting deep. He was cutting a very shallow cut. But remember, we call it a spindle roughing gouge. We use it just on spindles. So please, just on spindles. So how do you sharpen it? Once again, I go back to the pocket bar. So I pull the pocket bar out, just like before. I'm going to match the bevel on my wheel, and then I'm going to turn the grinder on and rotate the spindle roughing gouge back and forth like this to sharpen that edge, that bevel. Okay? Here's what's important about a spindle roughing gouge. The shape of this is kind of like a parabola. It's round at the bottom, but the sides kind of become straight, okay, when they get up here to the corners. And that's important to realize. It is not a half circle. It is not a hemisphere. It's not a half circle. These sides straighten out and go at an angle off from the center rather than coming around. So what that means is, can we go to the overhead camera just a moment? So when you're sharpening this, you're right here on the wheel. When you come around, stop at the corner of the tool and look at this. I'm at the corner of the tool, but this wood is across the two sides of the tool, and it is not straight up and down like this is. It is still at an angle. So you can see from where you can see down into the inside of the tool, but the corner is on the wheel. When I come around to the other side, same thing. Go to the corner and stop. Here's what you want to do. When you look at this tool straight ahead, get it down here, should be able to put a piece of wood across the tool. Let me do it over here. Maybe you can do it like this, okay? Right there. So when we put a piece of wood, a straight edge, across the top of the tool, it touches the whole surface. Okay? When you look at it from the side, it's the same thing. There we are. It touches the whole surface. If you are not careful when you sharpen this and you come around too far on these corners, you will end up bringing this edge here down, and you will curve that corner like that instead of having it nice and straight and square. What difference does it make? Frankly, a lot of times it doesn't make much of a difference. But if you're trying to come into a flat surface on a spindle, you have a flat face and you're trying to cut up to that flat face. Let's say this wheel was a flatter spot on a spindle, and I wanted to cut that spindle up right to that face. Yeah, here we are. Well, that doesn't really do it because it's not a flat face. Thanks. But in order to cut a nice corner down in there, I've got to have a square corner on this. So you should be able to look at this tool like this, and it's flat, and that touches all the way across and around, and you can turn it this way, and you get the same look, and it's flat. So really important to remember that on a spindle roughing gouge. There are specialty tools that you can make. Here's one. This is a piece of 1/2 inch high-speed steel, which I bought, and the stuff's not free, but what a great tool this is. And I made a parting tool out of it. So I have a 1/2 inch parting tool. I find it enormous. I do a lot of commercial work, a lot of spindle work, but this is enormously helpful for what I do. And on the other end of it, I have a round nose scraper. So I find that is very helpful too. Oh yeah, look at this. Here's a specialty tool that Ray made. And what it is kind of a box scraper where he ground this side at an angle. You see, that doesn't come up the same edge, the same direction there. There's an angle cut right there, ground right into it, but then the tip is at 90 degrees to that angle, and that makes a box scraper out of it. So he can go into a box and scrape down the side and then get a square corner down in the bottom of it. Yes, because it's at an angle, as you go into the box, the shaft is actually way out of the way, and it's a specialty tool. There are lots of specialty tools. You can make them. I've made them. I think most of you have seen some of the tools I've made with old worn-out planer blades and jointer blades. Those are terrific. I've made round nose scrapers and so forth. Here are a couple of each. Here are a couple of round nose scrapers. This is out of a jointer blade. You can see here's the angle. if you get a joiner blade and you're going to make a hand tool out of it, the first thing you want to do is grind off that sharp edge where you'll find your fingers on the floor. Not good. So, and then you just, round off the end to make a nice round nose scraper. Here's a piece of 3/16 inch high-speed steel. I showed you my 1/2 inch bar. This is a 3/16 inch bar, and I have, once again, a little round nose scraper at the end of it, and a skew at the other end. I use these all the time. They're terrific. A couple of other scrapers that I made are Skew Scrapers. Once again, they're jointer blades that were worn out. I adjusted the shape to what I needed. One is not angled very much. One is angled quite a bit. I use them both. I use them a lot. If you're doing a lot of spindle work, these kind of tools are very helpful. But they're sharpened just like the others I already showed you, with the pocket, well, not with the pocket bar, on the platform, because I use them as scrapers, and the one that is a skew, I use them just like I showed you a little bit ago. I think that's it. Get my ponytail back here in the back. Okay, do you have any questions about any of these things? We haven't covered what's the round bit? Victor was talking about earlier. I can't think of what it's called. The scrapers that like easy wood tools and so forth. Carbide tip tools, yes. The carbide tips, I haven't covered those. I finally had a need for one carbide tool, and I bought it. I rarely use it, so I haven't had to try to sharpen it. I probably wouldn't. I'd probably just buy a new tip for it. But if you have any questions for me, please ask them. But I'd like to have Victor talk about how he sharpens his carbide tips. I think that might be helpful too.
Tom?
Yes, sir.
You might mention that when you're purchasing a grinder, you want to make sure that it's a slow speed grinder versus a high speed grinder.
Terry, thank you. That's a good point. I meant to mention that. The grinders that are sold at Woodcraft are slow speed grinders. They rotate at 1,750 revolutions per minute. That's pretty fast. You think that's a slow speed grinder? Well, it is, because the high speed grinders rotate at about 3,500 RPM. But the reason you want a slow speed grinder or low speed grinder is because the speed does not overheat your tool. And the faster it runs, the quicker your wood turning tool, your steel tool, is going to heat up, and it's better to keep it at low speed and a little bit. But you can get grinders that have a switch, a choice between high speed and low speed. I've seen them. I've never had a need for one, so I haven't bought one. I mentioned wheels earlier, and the white aluminum oxide wheels. I think you could use those for probably most anything, but a lot of grinders you'll get have a 6-inch wheel and are gray. That is a very hard substance. I would use that to sharpen my axe, maybe my lawnmower blades and so forth, but I wouldn't use it for my wood turning tools. I would want the cubic boron nitride CBN wheels, or perhaps the aluminum oxide wheels for my wood turning tools on a low speed grinder. The other thing is, if you may have some new wood turners say, oh, well, I already have a grinder, and the grinder is a 6-inch, has 6-inch wheels. That's okay, having 6-inch wheels, but the problem is that your bevel is much more curved than the 8-inch wheel. The 8-inch wheel, the bevel is a lot flatter. It's a hollow ground bevel, but it's a lot flatter. A 6-inch wheel gives you a much deeper hollow ground, and I think the having a much more shallow grind on that is much better. So we as wood turners traditionally would use the 8-inch wheels, and I would certainly recommend that. Oh, one other point. Pop this on real quick. Okay, so look at this grinder a minute. You see how this has these metal shrouds over the wheels? Don't take those off. If you buy a grinder and you see your buddy has CBN wheels and he doesn't have shrouds over the wheels, that's just fine. Don't take the shrouds off of these stone wheels though, because those things can break. If there's a little crack in it, somehow gets a little crack in it, and it can blow up, it can disintegrate, and this shroud is to protect you and whatever else is around it. So, you know, I always recommend wearing safety glasses in the shop, even wearing a face shield sometimes when you're sharpening too, but particularly on using those kinds of grinders. The steel wheels, the CBN wheels, are not going to explode. They're not going to break up. They're going to be just fine. So you don't need the shroud. But do not take the shrouds off of your other grinder unless you're just changing wheels. And you, yeah. Oh, go ahead, Steve.
It's also important, make sure that if you got those grinders with the stones, that you match the stone speed with the grinder speed.
Yeah, some stones will be labeled as a maximum speed, so do pay attention to that. I think if you buy your wheels, your stones at a place like Woodcraft, they're going to be just fine.
That's important though. You don't want to put a slow speed stone on a high speed grinder.
Right. Yes. So pay attention to the speed. They should be labeled. The stones will be labeled. Yes.
On your pocket jig, the little piece that goes on the top, and you put your tool in and do the 2-inch thing and tighten it down. Okay. On
Yes.
that piece there, what is the angle? And why have you used that particular hole to put that that part that you stick into the pocket jig? Can't remember what you call the top thing.
Are you talking about
Yes,
this angle? Yeah.
Yes.
You know, it's a simple answer. Simple answer. When I bought a grinder at this very grinder jig from no, it was the other one. Doesn't matter. But I bought a very grind jig and the grinder all set up on a platform when I first started being a wood turner, because C.A. Savoy, one of the guys in our club back in Alexandria, would buy grinders, put them together, mount them on platforms with the Wolverine jig, and then sell them to club members. It was great. I didn't know what to do, and I could buy one from him already set up. So he had that angle on there, and he said, "You see this angle? Don't ever change it." Yes, sir, I won't. So I marked it. I know where it's supposed to be, and I leave it there. What I understand is that this angle, if you vary this angle, what you're doing is changing the angle on the side of your bowl gouge or your spindle gouge, where the angle on the end is going to be whatever you measure and set as it sits against the wheel. But when you change this, you're actually changing the angle of the sides of the tool. So I try to keep that uniform. I want it the same. I want it to be changing. I want to, you know, the tool to me is very important. And as I use that tool, I want to know what to expect. I don't have to think about how to hold it because I know what the angle is going to be and I can hold it the way I'm used to. So pick an angle and leave it there.
Thank you.
There's an important point about sharpening that I haven't mentioned yet, and that's that oftentimes when I'm teaching a class, have new wood turners, and they're trying to learn sharpening as well as learning wood turning and so forth, that they say to me, how do I know when to sharpen? And it's a good question. It's really a good question. And of course, we all know when to sharpen. It's instinct, right? Why is it instinct? Because you've been turning for a long time. You know what the feel is. You know what the sound is. You can tell if it needs to be sharpened or not. But when you're a new wood turner, you don't have that experience. You don't know yet. So what I recommend to those students is, if the thought even crosses your mind, stop. Go sharpen the tool, come back to the lathe. And if there's no difference, then either it didn't need to be sharpened, or the problem you might have been feeling is a technique issue rather than a sharpening issue. But if you come back from the grinder and you find that there's a difference in how the tool is working, how it's cutting and so forth, then take that as a lesson. It did need to be sharpened. Some woods will require sharpening. Okay. So you will find that if you come back from the grinder and it cuts better, then that's a lesson. And over time, if it even crosses your mind about whether you should sharpen or not, I wonder if I should sharpen my tool. The answer is yes, go do it. Come back, see how it cuts. If it cuts better, then it needed to be sharpened. There's no difference, but you thought you were having problems, and maybe it's a technique issue, and you need to either change your technique or get somebody to help you figure out the technique. Once you have the pocket bar set up where you want it, say you're doing bowl work and you're using bowl gouges, so you have your pocket bar set up so when you put the tool in the very grind jig and you have it 2 inches out, you have it all set, all you have to do is come over, put the tool in the very grind, measure it 2 inches, tighten it up, give it a couple of quick turns on the wheel, take the very grind off, drop it in a place to hold it again, and you're back at the lathe. Do that in 15 seconds. So, if you're a new wood turner, it'll take longer than that because you're learning. But don't turn with dull tools. Take the time to go sharpen them up. I don't think I showed you this. I showed you how to set up the lathe, but let me just show you this thing in the back here. I have a block of wood back here, and this block of wood is just glued to the platform with a couple of holes, 4 holes in it. I have a little diamond cone right there that I use sometimes to clean the bevel, the burr or the bevel if I've had to do a lot of shaping of a tool. I'll come back to that. This is the jig I use for that 40-degree grind. These are my 2 very grinds. One is for fat tools, one's for skinny tools. But this honing thing that I use, this little stick, what I have students come in and they've worked hard, they've tried to grind and sharpen their tools, and they have just messed them up something ferocious. So I will go to the grinder, reshape the tool on a coarse wheel to get it back to the right shape. And when I've done that, then I'll take this little diamond stick and just go I just go in the flute and just lightly clean off the burr on the inside of that flute, of that bowl gouge, and that seems to work just fine. But that's really I use a coarse wheel for my scrapers and the skew, and the fine wheel for my bowl gouges and spindle gouges, for my spindle roughing gouge, and for my I guess for the skew I use the coarse wheel too. But I use that coarse wheel to change the shape of tools. If I need to make a big change, I go to that one, and then I'll touch it up on the fine wheel to get a fine wheel. Other questions?
Tell us
Yes, sir.
again. Tell us again the coarseness of your fine wheel and your coarse wheel on your CBN tool.
Okay, this coarse wheel I think is an 80 grit, and I think the fine wheel is 160. It's not actually marked on them. Wait a minute, maybe it is marked on them. Hold on a second. Yeah, this wheel is 180 grit, and this wheel is 80. So I have 80 and 180 on these two. I got these wheels from D-Way Tools, and when I bought them, they were $200 a piece. That was a long time ago. It was a business. I was doing custom architectural wood turning, so I could buy those, write it off as a business expense, worked just fine. But I think the price has come down considerably since then. So they're nice to haves, but not must haves.
Any other questions for Tom? Well, if not, thanks so much, Tom. I always learn some things. I appreciate you sharing your custom tools you made out of high-speed steel. That gives ideas for folks like me that like to tinker with things. That's fantastic. And the handouts are in the email that you should have received this morning. So there's some more real informative stuff that Tom provided. So take advantage of that.